will you be also able to send me a recording?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
Yeah. So after this is over,
Yeah.
will you also be able to send me a recording? Thank you.
Yeah, that shouldn't be
Absolutely.
a problem. Yeah.
Okay. I think we should get started. And I want to thank everybody here. Okay, it's not clear. Is it clear now? Clearer now, Swagata? No, I don't know what the problem is. We've been doing these Google's webinars for so long now, and we've never had a problem. So,
Actually, it's not continuously breaking, it's breaking sometimes. So maybe it's the problem is not exactly with your equipment or things, it's something to do with some technical glitch that's
with the
happening.
network, maybe.
Yeah, yeah, looks
Yeah.
like that.
Yes, yes. Well, I'll try and keep my introductions as short and clear. Hopefully that will help. Okay, so let me just start by introducing the topic and also our speaker today. I want to thank all of you first for joining in today. Uh, I don't want to start by saying, wishing you all a happy World Environment Day, because as far as I'm concerned and as far as ENSYDE is concerned, Environment Day is every day. And I hope a lot of you on this call, on this webinar today feel the same. So I would like to first of all introduce the topic a little bit, and then I'll go ahead and introduce our speaker. The East Kolkata wetlands is basically one of the largest ensembles of sewage-fed wetlands in the world, and a unique example of treated wetlands which save about 1 crore of rupees every year for a city as large as Calcutta. But the thing about these wetlands, the speciality about these wetlands is that it's not just the fact that they were never originally sewage fed, but they were salt marshes and were fed by the tidal spill of the river Badiyar. Following this, an ecological crisis which brought about a combination of factors. Dr. Birendra Nath Dey, the first Bengali chief engineer of Calcutta Municipal Corporation, brought about a series of engineering interventions to design an efficient.
One second, Mandir. Yeah, so someone is recommending that Dhruba ma'am, you mute your audio for some time when Manuel is speaking. Yeah, now try.
Okay.
Yeah,
Isn't
way
that
better.
better?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So basically, I was saying the first Bengali chief engineer of Calcutta Municipal Corporation brought about a series of engineering interventions to design an efficient and sufficient outfall of drainage system for the city of Calcutta. Our speaker today, Dhruba Dasgupta, will be talking about this evolution of this outfall system and the relevance of its unique engineering initiative and the lessons that we can learn from it. While this is unique to Calcutta per se, a lot of the cities in our country today have wetland systems around us. In fact, in our country, we have almost 5% of India has wetlands, and almost 7.5 lakh wetlands have been mapped through a GPS system. A lot of these have come under the Ramsar Convention, which is the international treaty on managing our wetlands worldwide. And unfortunately, because of large-scale urbanization, we see a lot of this, close to about 1/3 of our wetlands have been lost and continue to be, getting lost as a result of development. So in order to address this, I mean, while we're looking at a specific example of Calcutta, I want all of you out there to kind of look at the relationships that this kind of throws open for the cities and towns that you belong to. Because, like I said, a lot of our areas have mangroves, we have marshes, we have swamps, and these are extremely biodiverse, extremely sensitive and fragile ecosystems, which are getting disturbed not just by urbanization but also because of the recent issues related to climate change, right? So we will hear a lot more of this, and I hope we will have a lot of question and answer sessions. So I will go quickly into introducing our speaker. Dhruba Dasgupta is a conservation worker with a focus on urban drainage and wastewater management. Her research and conservation work is in the wetland ecosystems, especially in the East Kolkata wetlands, the largest ensemble of wastewater wetlands in the world, and which is also a Ramsar site and thus protected area. Dhruba's current research conducted at the IIEST Shivapur Department of Civil Engineering focuses on revisiting the efficiency of the waste stabilization pond system as a low-cost wastewater treatment option and its role in improving the lives of the community. She has been associated with the East Kolkata wetlands for more than 2 decades. Her work also includes research in ecological history, especially how engineering interventions are received among the community for their livelihood pursuits. And she has published nationally, internationally, extensively in various journals on this subject. She also has a background in rural development, anthropology, and community management, and her grassroots conservation work seeks to highlight the unread voices of the marginalized wetland communities. She carries out a lot of community welfare work through her institution called SCOPE, which is the Society for Creative Opportunities and Participatory Ecosystems. She sits on the board of governors for the Rural Development Forum of the Institute of Engineers in Calcutta. So that's a brief description, and I really want to welcome her very warmly. We never knew each other before this webinar, and she quickly accepted it. So thank you very much, Dhruba, and we're really looking forward to learning from you. The various linkages that we can see and how communities depend so extensively and how the wetlands depend so extensively on community management. So over to you. I'm happy if you want to say a few words before you start your presentation, or you can go directly into that. You'll have to unmute, Dhruba.
Thank you, Manuel. A very warm thank you to you, to ENSYDE, to all the audience that has thought that they could spend an hour listening to the East Kolkata wetlands story, because that is a story that I will tell today, connecting it with some of the key themes that have been identified by the United Nations Environment Program. And so before I begin my presentation, which I'm going to keep as compact as possible, I will say a few words connecting the theme of this year's World Environment Day and of the decade ahead of us with what I am going to speak about today. So as you all know, that the 5th of June 2021 is not just World Environment Day for 2021. It is also 2021 is the beginning of a decade that the United Nations has fixed as the decade of ecosystem restoration. And therefore, the theme of this year's World Environment Day has been to reimagine, recreate, and restore. And East Kolkata wetlands, I'm going to show, connects very intimately with this. But before that, I think there are a few words that I would like to read out from, a few sentences that I would like to read out from the Declaration of the United Nations Conference on the human environment that was held in 1972 at Stockholm. We all know it as the Stockholm Conference. And 5th June was the first day, and it was celebrated as World Environment Day. So the conference ended on the 16th of June. And incidentally, 16th of June has a very special connection with West Bengal, because in 1990, my late teacher, Dhruba was awarded the UN Global 500 Roll of Honor for his outstanding work on conservation of the East Kolkata wetlands. And he thought the occasion to be fit for celebration, such that on 16th of June, which was the first day of the month of Ashar, which is the onset of the monsoon, the 16th of June, Wetlands Day was celebrated in West Bengal. So we actually predate the celebration of World Wetlands Day, which began in 1998. We predated by 8 years in West Bengal, celebrating Wetlands Day, State Wetlands Day, every year on the 16th of June. And that was the level of Dr. Ghosh's commitment. He never thought that something that was his recognition was his recognition. It was basically recognition of the state of West Bengal. And my message to you right in the beginning of our conversation today will be that don't think of yourself as separate from the environment. So when Manuel said that for us, World Environment Day, every day is World Environment Day, which is a very, very important thing to remember. Think of yourself as part of the environment. And to just borrow a little bit from international wisdom, from the common agreement that was arrived at, the declaration that was arrived at in 1972, let me read out a little bit. A point has been reached in history when we must shape our actions throughout the world with a more prudent care for their environmental consequences. Through ignorance or indifference, we can do massive and irreversible harm to the earthly environment on which our life and well-being depend. Conversely, through fuller knowledge and wiser action, we can achieve for ourselves and our posterity a better life in an environment more in keeping with human needs and hopes. There are broad vistas for the enhancement of environmental quality and the creation of a good life. What is needed is an enthusiastic but calm state of mind and intense but orderly work. For the purpose of attaining freedom in the world of nature, man must use knowledge to build, in collaboration with nature, a better environment. To defend and improve the human environment for present and future generations has become an imperative goal for mankind, a goal to be pursued together with and in harmony with the established and fundamental goals of peace and of worldwide economic and social development. And I pause for a second just to let the impact sink in, because I think these words that were said nearly 50 years ago hold just as much relevance today. Intensity, but calmness, and a commitment that we really, really need with all the sincerity that we can think of. And that's why when we talk about recreating, restoring, and reimagining, the specific story of these Calcutta wetlands goes like this. How was an ecosystem which was sinking for various reasons, how did it invite intervention, reimagining, recreating, and then restoring an ecosystem with an innovation which has lasted about 100 years and still looks to last for more if we are willing to conserve it. So with these words, I will get into my presentation and Here it is.
While Dhruba is bringing that up, I just wanted to request all of you to keep your mics on mute while you're not speaking. And if you have any questions, please put them in the chat box.
So I think there are some issues, but I'll just try and see. So is this shared? Is it working, Manuel?
No.
Okay.
I think go to present now and do present entire screen.
Yeah, so that's what I did, entire screen, and yet I think there's something
If it's in Google Drive, it won't work. So you'll have to download it.
No, it's not in Google Drive. It's there on my on the desktop of my laptop, and that's what I was trying. So I think to do very quickly, I'm very sorry, but can I request the presentation, since I've kind of sent it over, can I request you to kindly share the screen, and I'll make the presentation.
Yeah, I can do that.
Yeah. I really apologize for this, but this is what I always feared. Sometimes, these last minute things happen. And okay, so yes. So what I will do is I will just raise hand for screen to be changed, and Anvay kindly do the changing. So this is.
Sorry, just 1 second. I can't see your hand. I can only see the presentation. So
Okay.
just let me know when to share.
Yeah. Okay. So this is one of the lifelines of these Calcutta wetlands. It's called fishery feeding channel, and this feeds sewage to a large number of fisheries in the wetlands. But let's go right to the next slide, where we can. Yes, I think that's perfect. So what we can see here is, you can see the Hooghly River and the city of Kolkata in between the Hooghly River and the boundary area, red boundary marked area, which is basically the East Kolkata wetlands. To see this clearer, the next slide shows the historic aspects of the East Kolkata wetlands. And so these are the largest ensemble of sewage-fed wetlands in the world. And this treats the city sewage at almost no cost. And there are 5 million residents in Kolkata proper. And the basic treatment of sewage is through natural biological means. So the next slide, please, Anvay. So these are more details about the wetlands. They have total waste management done, which means the sewage as well as the solid waste, both are managed, and they serve as basically treatment wetlands, and they treat sewage. How do they do it? Through food production, growing fish, vegetables, and paddy. We can have a thematic diagram, which is the next slide. So this is the most important part. See, there are 4 pumping stations which carry the city sewage through various canals into the wetlands. And you can see the fishery feeding channel. The 2 main channels here, which are the outfall channels, they are actually the dry weather flow and the storm weather flow. We'll speak more about these things. What they do in terms of food production, you can see the yellow highlighted circles, and these are vegetable gardens. They are right in the beginning. And then comes the fish ponds, which use wastewater, municipal sewage, city sewage to grow fish. And then there are also, there's this green box where there are many paddy fields, and there are two regulator gates. There's one regulator gate near something called Topshia Point A, which is the driver the flow regulator gate. And we actually have all the pumping stations sending their sewage to this place. And then these sewage gets carried through two channels. One is the storm weather flow, which carries basically, which is more important during the rainy season, because it drains out the storm water from the city to prevent it from flooding. And there is the dry weather flow, which is the actual sewage carrying channel which goes into the wetlands. So then we will go into the next slide, which shows the actual map. So this is a historic map, and this map basically shows, please see this very carefully. There are 4 pumping stations which are shown, and then there is 3 inside the wetland area. There are 3 kinds of land use that have been highlighted. So the pumping stations, and from there the outfall canals, and then the first area which has big black dots, that is called Dhapa. And Dhapa is the vegetable growing area mostly. Dhapa also grows fish, and Dhapa had it was the first area where there was a land use called, there were 2 things which were done over here, both fish growing and paddy and vegetable growing. And this was called basically co-recycling. And what used to happen was that city sewage used to come here. They used to grow fish in long elongated finger ponds, and then that fish growing used to treat the water up to a point, and then after 6 months the fish used to be harvested, and then that water, whatever nutrient was left, that used to be used to grow the vegetables. And the people of these Kolkata wetlands had a very important worldview, which was very different from what we generally look at in our textbooks of Western epistemological knowledge. We look upon wastewater as a pollutant in the West, but here the fish farmers, they look upon wastewater as a nutrient. That is the worldview, and this worldview is something that had to be understood on the field, on the ground, so that the productivity of this ecosystem and why it was like this could be taken to the world, and its story could be told to the world. So many people have very strong ideas about, okay, so this is wastewater, and there are things which are problematic with it, and so on and so forth. Now, I work, as you know, in the Department of Civil Engineering, my research in the Environmental Engineering Laboratory in IIEST Shibpur. And the technical detail is, or the scientific fact is, that we have something called the biological oxygen demand to the chemical oxygen demand, BOD to COD. If this ratio is 0.5:1 or more than that, then that sewage is appropriate to be used as nutrient for producing food in an inexpensive manner. So the Dhapa area grew fish and vegetables. Even today they do, but vegetables mostly. Then the next area, which has long stripes, vertical stripes, that area has maximum growing of fish ponds where sewage is treated. And this is the most eco-friendly and scientifically valid way of treating city sewage where there are no industries. And Kolkata's sewage system, it's got its underground sewage system. It's something very important to remember, that it is a combined sewage system, which means both the sewage water, the wastewater, and rainwater are collected through the same sewer pipes, and they are hugely diluted. So this municipal sewage, if you can see something called the environmental, there's a manual on, there's a sewerage manual. There's this institution called CPHEEO, which is a public health engineering department of the government of India, and they have this sewage treatment manual, where you will see that actually sewage is 99% water and 1% fecal matter. And this fecal matter contains something called Escherichia coli, which is bacteria, and that is the pathogenic bacteria which basically gets treated in these fish ponds through a process called algae bacteria symbiosis, where there is exchange of carbon dioxide and oxygen between algae and bacteria, and there is proliferation, and that algal bloom or that algal proliferation is taken care of by fish. They feed on the algae, they are the ecological manipulator, and then the disintegration of the bacteria happens, they lose their harmful character, and this is the way in which this treatment happens comprehensively. We have been comparing the safety limits that is prescribed by the Government of India and the Central Pollution Control Board, and we know that the wastewater ponds treat fish comprehensively. The next part is the space which has a lot of dots. There you have paddy fields as well as fish ponds, and there are alternating uses. Paddy cum fishery happens. That is the main land use character. So these three types of land use characters through which the sewage gets comprehensively treated before it goes further into through the outfall canals, which then reach a river called Kulti, which is 17 miles downstream. Then can we go to the next slide? This one and the next one, please. So these two, I'm not going to dwell much on them, but the wetlands were actually part of the Sundarbans, and they used to be called salt lakes. And this was the picture that you saw it was painted, hand painted in 1828. Okay, we go to the next slide to just give you an idea. This is what Calcutta used to look like in 1924, and these were the saltwater. These were the saltwater marshes. So you can see them here, and the river Bidadhuri that Manuel mentioned in her earlier introduction. The river Bidadhuri used to flow through this place. And there were three reasons why the river Bidadhuri had a lot of trouble. So we'll go to the next slide and show it. So Bidadhuri used to help in delta building, and its spill channels used to spill all over the Salt Lake area. And this water was used by a large number of fish ponds. That was the dominant ecosystem. So a large number of fish ponds which used to use this salt water or brackish water, and they used to cultivate fish. But they used to prevent the Bidadhuri from spilling, because they used to, they used to have sluice gates, and they used to close that. And the river used to find a problem in spilling. So this was one of the problems that it had. But far bigger than that, it had this problem that Bidadhuri was used for navigation purposes, and the use of lock gates because of navigation purposes led to a great deal of silting, and engineering intervention after intervention came from the British. And what happened, uh, if you could go to the next slide, please. So because of the commodities trade, and that was about 4 million pounds a year, the British were particularly interested in managing the river through continuous, modification or joining of a whole lot of canals that were present over here. And to do that, they actually, greatly altered the hydraulics of the river, and this led to the demise of the river. In From around 1876 onwards, when the pumping station started operating, there was an irrigation department that managed the navigation, but the Calcutta Municipal Corporation, which was entitled to a safe and sufficient outfall river for the city to dispose the sewage, that got denied. That was controlled by the government overall and the irrigation department, and they did not have enough communication between them. The river had started deteriorating, and the irrigation department never communicated enough to the Calcutta Corporation. And so the river really, I mean, with on the one hand, with spill channels having problems, then sewage problems, then the river being modified very much, engineered too much of river engineering, things just broke down. So what happened? Next slide, please. There was this first Bengali chief engineer. In 1923, the management of the Calcutta Municipal Corporation got handed over to Indians, and to Bengalis more specifically. And so this entire, our first mayor was Chittaranjan Das, and our first CEO, chief executive officer, was Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose. And in 1923, they found out that the river was in dire straits, and they initially relied upon British engineers to find a way out, but they could not. So in 1929, when the British chief engineer was unwell and he had gone on furlough, the corporation brought in this Bengali gentleman, Dr. Birendranath Dey, and he was exceptionally gifted, and it was because of him that interventions and innovations took place. So we go to the next slide, and these were the outfall canals that Dr. Dey built. So these were two outfall canals which I mentioned earlier, dry weather flow and storm weather flow. And the storm weather flow was to carry out storm water during the rainy seasons. That was the main reason. Because Kolkata had such high levels of water accumulation, cholera was a very horrific disease, and this was a commonality they had with London. London and Kolkata have the very similar drainage system, but Kolkata's drainage system started being built in about a year before they started doing it in London. We started we started the building and the measurements, etc., in 1858. London started after us. And so what happened was, this sewage fed, this storm weather flow idea was definitely there in a lot of other places, but the dry weather flow idea never happened anywhere else. And why did it happen? It happened, there were many reasons. At that point of time, if you remember, there were world wars being fought, there was a food crisis, and it was established knowledge from the early 20th century that city sewage could be used to grow fish. And so how to supply the city sewage throughout the year and do something that helps in food production. The initial idea was fish growing mainly. That was the idea that Birendranath Dey had, and at that point of time, Director of Fisheries, his name was Sundarlal Vora, he also said that this was an implementable idea. So the dry weather flow for sewage availability throughout the year, and this is what happens today also. And so it is the dry weather flow that led to the transformation of the ecosystem from a saltwater based ecosystem to a wastewater based ecosystem, and it is fully utilized. As much of city sewage as comes here, one small portion goes into the river Ganges also. There are small treatment plants there, but not very functional. We have the majority of the sewage flowing into this part of this drainage system, and so the treatment happens through food production. We go into the next slide. This is just for just an old picture. This was in 1935, and this is near Kulti River, the river into which both these outfall channels get drained. And the next one. So this was a very, very important idea that was conceived by Birendranath Dey, a 10-vent regulator gate where sewage would be maintained at a certain level. This is in a place called Bantala, and this is what brought the sewage to the wetlands through the fishery feeding channel. So the next slide, please. So here you will see the regulator gate. Earlier in the top picture, it used to be, the control of this whole thing used to be done manually, mechanically. But now it is done by use of electricity, so that the regulation of the gates can be more efficient. Okay, next one. So why is this important? This is important because, why is the East Calcutta wetlands ecosystem so important? Because many of you may not have been born in 1986. In fact, even through the 70s and late 70s and early 80s, this issue of the pollution of the river Ganga was gaining national attention, and something had to be done about it. As early as 1979, the then Prime Minister Indira Gandhi had asked the chairman of the Central Pollution Control Board at that time, Professor Niloy Chaudhary, to find out what are the things that were polluting the Ganga River and what could be done to do something about it, to clean it of its pollution. And so the decision was arrived that, okay, the point source pollution, which means municipalities along the towns that are along the river Ganga, they were responsible for a lot of pollution. They were throwing their sewage untreated into the river, and that was causing problems. So what would have to be done? The wastewater would have to be diverted away from Ganga River, and they had to be treated before they were disposed in the Ganga. And so there were also conceptualizations of sewage treatment plants, and this is how all of that started. So at that point of time, my teacher, Dhruba Ghosh, had discovered these wetlands in 1980-81, when the then finance minister of West Bengal, Ashok Mitra, had heard from somewhere that wastewater could be used. So he had asked that this should be further investigated. And so Sir actually did all of this investigation. He didn't know what to do. He said, what can I do? And he started walking along the outfall channels. He didn't do anything out of this world. He just used his common sense and started walking along the outfall channels, and he discovered these wetlands and how things were treated. So then what he did was he took the story of the wetlands to the world. he took it to the urban development secretary here, who had been briefed about the Ganga action plan, and together they worked on this, and they brought the next slide, please. Together they brought the National Environmental Engineering Research Institute. They asked scientific examination of the wastewater and the treatment, and they did a lot of tests, and they found out that yes, this is a natural biological sewage treatment plant. These are oxidation ponds, shallow ponds where sunlight penetrates and food growing happens, and this can be absolutely acknowledged as a natural biological sewage treatment plant. And I'll tell you a little very interesting story which Sir did. He brought the then Chief Minister, Jyoti Basu, to the wetlands. And he took a glass of water from a fish pond and drank it. And everybody was surprised, and he had a whole lot of bureaucrats around him. They said, what are you doing? What are you doing? So Jyoti Basu just asked one thing. He said, nothing will happen to you. So Sir said, sir, I don't have a laboratory in front of me. This is the best proof that I have that this sewage treatment plant is a sewage treatment plant. This treats the wastewater, and little bit of whatever goes into my stomach, the hydrochloric acid that is there in my stomach, that will take care of this. I have one request for you, sir. You are the important person in the Ganga Action Plan committee. So please ensure that not a single rupee comes by way of sewage treatment plants, mechanical ones, to Bengal. And Jyoti Basu listened to him. And so for a very long time, we never had a single penny come. So this was the sewage treatment that was happening, and that is still happening. And so next one, next slide. So the Ganga Action Plan, the main words were interception and diversion. But for us, what did we add to that? The word treatment. Interception, that is, we intercept all the sewage, city sewage, through the pumping stations. Then we send it through the outfall canals, which is the diversion. Then we send it through the fishery feeding canal and other canals to the wetlands, which is for the treatment. And then they send the treated water back to the storm weather flow, and it gets treated. And before it goes, it gets comprehensively treated. Within the wetlands, it gets comprehensively treated. And in 2010, there was this set of IIT professors who had come together. And my present professor is one of the professors who was there in that group, to find out the efficacies of the wastewater treatment systems. And they found out that this pond-based system was absolutely efficacious, and it could continue to be used. So we have, this is an urban asset. And so this urban asset, they started building this from 1935 onwards. The internal drainage system of the city also got a facelift, and this outfall system, it used to be called Dr. B.N. Dey's outfall scheme, after him. And the road which showed the drainage system from Topshia, which was the starting point, to Kulti, which is the ending point, that used to be called Topshia Kulti Road. But in honor of Dr. B.N. Dey, that ultimately got renamed as Dr. B.N. Dey Road. Next slide. So this is what I want to say. This is the person behind the keywords that we have discussed today: reimagine, recreate, restore. He understood this whole story and took it to the world. In 1986, he was the first person, possibly set up the first Wetlands Institute in Asia to research on wetland ecosystems and how they can be used for the welfare of humankind. He was a very far ahead thinking scientist, ecologist, and he integrated science and society, and the people of the wetlands looked upon him as a god. he actually not just took the story of the wetlands to the world, but he also took it to the Ramsar people. And they, in 2002, they actually, this wetland got recognized under the Ramsar Convention, and it got, you know, the special mention in 2017 in the UN World World Water Development Report. In 2017, the Ramsar Secretary General mentioned East Kolkata wetlands, and there was another wetlands in Uganda called Nakitubo, as you know, of fundamental importance as example in the world as risk mitigating and green infrastructure. So this is a wetland community. Next slide. The connect is between Dr. Ghosh for his environmental stewardship and the community whose story he took to the world, because he said that these are my teachers. They are the ones who taught him. They are the ones who actually inspired him to take their story to the world. Because, you know, he always used to say that you have to first unlearn what you learn through your textbooks when you come to the East Kolkata wetlands. You have to unlearn. You have to, he used to give it a great name. He called it cognitive apartheid. And he said that, you know, we have to shed our thinking that just because we are educated and these people have less of formal education, they understand their ecosystems with an urgency because it is their livelihood that depends on it. And these are the things that we have to learn, and there are things that they also have to learn from us, and these two things should be continuously interchanged. And we as civil society, we have to respect this interchange and exchange of knowledge. And this is how you know, we take the story forward. And so this is basically what I want to say. And next slide. We need to survive together. This is me standing with the wetland community person at the heart of the wetlands. And for me, this is not just wetlands, not just an ecosystem. This is my pilgrimage. And this is what I stay with for the rest of my life. There are some resources which I will put in the chat box after this. And you can see there are films that we have made. But this is my presentation. I really wanted to finish 5 minutes earlier, Manvel, so that we had 15 whole minutes. But I hope I have done justice to what you requested me.
Okay, thank you so much, Dhruba. I think that was an excellent presentation. I think you'll need to mute while I'm speaking. Yeah, thank you. Yeah. So I think it's wonderful to hear the kind of linkages between engineering, community, and you know, our urban systems, right? I think we tend to forget, and we tend to look at urban systems as just buildings and infrastructure in a very basic form, buildings, roads, and you know, those kind of things. And we don't. Very few people really focus their attention on the kind of infrastructure that is required for communities to sustain ecologically in a very environmentally sensitive manner. This presentation also throws open something which is very very unusual in a sense, because it's one of the few cities, I think, which has adopted something like this. In terms of managing its sewage and the wastewater. I don't know of any other city in the country which does that, right? So I think the innovation itself is, while it might seem so many years ago, it might have seemed something which was just to be done. Today, it's still something we can learn from, right? I'm just going to quickly take one example of what's happening. I mean, a lot of us here are in Bangalore, and just to draw the parallel, to this is that we have completely urbanized all our valley systems. While our valley systems are meant for stormwater and rainwater flow, it has become completely contaminated, or rather mixed with all kinds of wastewater systems as well, which are all flowing into the rivers and thereafter. So the kind of impact that has had on the quality of life, the quality of the crops that are grown in the peri-urban areas, the kind of lifestyles that has resulted because of flooding and mismanagement of the natural drainage and the natural flow. I think what comes out of your presentation is don't mess with the natural system, right? Try and work with the natural system, and I think that engineering feat, if you want to call it that, is clearly visible from what you have described. So I think that's an amazing thing. Thank you so much for presenting that. Let's look at some questions if anybody has any, and then I can also ask a few points that I have. I see Chintan.
So just 1 second, Manvel, which I will, one observation, which is, there is a book called Wetlands in Danger by a very renowned scientist by the name of Patrick Dugan, who was very intimately associated with the Ramsar Convention, and he made a classification. He said European civilizations are hydraulic civilizations and Asian civilizations are aquatic civilizations. So hydraulic civilizations basically exhibited a lot of fear, and whenever they saw a wetland, they had to modify it somehow, drain it, convert it into agriculture, and that's something that they tried to do with the East Calcutta wetlands too when they were here, when they were at the helm of affairs. But that's an entirely different but very fascinating story why that didn't happen. I won't go into that, but Asian civilizations are basically aquatic civilizations. Why? Because they too manage their wetlands, but they do it by going along with nature and not against nature. Okay.
Thank you, Dhruba. So I'm just going to look at the question which is there. It's not really a question, but Chintan Mehta says that he's been working as a volunteer in Gujarat in another NGO, and he has seen the importance that it has played in terms of bringing back birds, that are there. So I think he is looking to see if he can work with you. So maybe you can answer that.
Okay, so actually, birds are an integral part of the wetlands all over the world. And the Ramsar Convention originally was a convention of protecting wetlands because of the importance as waterfowl habitat. That is what it was called. Okay, waterfowl convention for preservation of waterfowl habitat, something of that kind. And so, whenever you conserve wetlands, even in our wetlands, birds are so many in number and such a variety, especially in the winter season. But along with birds, for us, trees are also a very important wealth, and other kinds of vegetation are also important. So for East Calcutta wetlands, it is a web of life that is important. That is something that you have to remember. And because these are treatment wetlands, the ponds are of fundamental importance. So the link between the ponds and the fish and the human beings and the safety of the city, that is the key message. And tagging along with that, these wetlands and this form of treatment has immense relevance for all those, tier 2, tier 3 cities, which are more towns than cities, maybe urban places, where they do not have a big sewage treatment budget and they need to do it in an inexpensive manner, and they don't have many industries. If that is the kind of scenario, as is with many cities in our country, tier 2, tier 3, then this is a replicable option. So, I will be more than happy to welcome you to see these wetlands. Mr. Mehta. And there are things that you will see that I think I couldn't uphold in my presentation enough.
Thank you, Dhruba. Any other questions from the audience before I ask a few of my own? If you want, it's a smaller group, so if you want to unmute and ask, that's fine too.
Excuse me, ma'am. I'm Suman Malik. I'm from Ahmedabad University. So I'm working on the effect of invasive species over these East Kolkata wetlands. So recently there is a very downfall in the aquaculture of these carps. So mainly East Kolkata wetlands produces much quantity of carps. So mainly rohu, katla, these freshwater fishes. But due to this invasive fish, the sailfin catfish one, that is in common language, it is known as crocodile fish. So these invasive species are also affecting this aquaculture in present days. So I am working with that at present, and I am trying to understand how this ecosystem is changing or how these invasive species are affecting the current ecosystem. So so in that case, I want to know means how this is there any other ways to means this all these poor quality waters actually is favorable for these invasive species. So so is there any way to control it?
Uh, so the last part of your question got somewhat blurred, I think, but I will try and answer the things that I have understood from your question. Crocodile fish is a problem, but it is not a problem that does not have a solution. The real problem right now is because is of urban renewal. And urban renewal basically means that the availability of sewage and the pathway through which the sewage is available has to be improved so that more sewage becomes available. That is one of the most important and fundamental problems. If you don't have sewage, then this ecosystem does not survive. As far as crocodile fish is concerned, there are biological, interventions or solutions that can be thought of in terms of how to take care of the crocodile fish and how to convert them into something that can be useful. Because crocodile fish is something that the people who do the management in the fish ponds are aware of. And what we need is both some amount of research work as well as integrated management work so that this can be dealt with. This is not a problem that doesn't have a solution.
Okay, thank you.
Dhruba, I have a quick question before I go to the chat box. So I think one of the things that has fascinated me about the topic that you had given me, talked about today, was, I mean, I know it goes way back sorry, there's a vendor outside with a big mic, so hopefully you can hear me. So what was the acceptance of the citizens of Kolkata to being able to consume the fish that was grown or rather cultured in sewage water? I think that's something that would have been would have taken some amount of convincing, apart from the fact that he went there and drank the water to show that it is very that it's potable. But I think it would require a lot more than that to convince people to actually buy fish that is grown or cultured in that water. You're on mute.
Yeah. So there are two parts to that answer, Manvel. One thing is, what is the quality of the sewage which comes out of the pumping stations? And that is scientifically monitored and maintained and understood. And the next part is, what is the cultural aspect? The cultural aspect is that when we consume fish, you have to look at pollution as a relative measure and not an absolute measure. Because when you consume fish from the rivers, there is also riverine pollution. And if you consume fish from another water body, such as the wetlands, there is enough chance for pollution. Now, what do we do? Because our city does not have lots of industries, and the drainage system is such that anything that has contamination has a separate drainage system which doesn't have anything to do with the sewage that goes to the wetlands. I mean, I didn't get into all those details here. It would be difficult to, so that is there. That is why this sewage is safe for utilization as nutrients. And what do we do? Where does bioaccumulation take place? It takes place in the gills, in the fins, in the scales, and something inside the fish stomach. All of this is cleaned out before we use the fish, and that too we deep fry it before we have it. So that comprehensively, that cultural practice comprehensively takes care of the the safety concerns that people have regarding the fish. If you're deliberately doing something that spoils the fish, then that is a different matter that needs investigation. But otherwise, these are the things that we, this is an ecosystem that was very carefully, done, and enough room left open for its management, its continuous management. Otherwise, this would not have been as it is. And Sir actually replicated this ecosystem in 3 of our towns also. They used to work very well, but they got shut down because of, political reasons. Because these things empowered the community and not the politicians. So if the politician cannot make enough of buck out of it, they don't have enough, interest in this kind of an ecosystem where it is the community that is empowered more than anyone else. So these things do happen.
Yeah,
I think
thank you.
Swagata has raised her hand. You can go ahead and ask Swagata.
Thank you so much to giving me that opportunity that I can speak. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you for your presentation. And it was really nice. And I actually have lots of information from your presentation. Thank you so much. Ma'am, I have a question that, ma'am, actually, this wetland is constantly continuous contraction. So, ma'am, how can we regain this entire thing? Because in previous, it was more than, at the present data, it is maybe 125 square kilometer, but previously it has more kilometers. And, ma'am, it constantly sequestering. So that is why I'm asking you, if there is any kind of, if you have any kind of, answer regarding that. If you could answer that, how can we regain the exact amount, entire place?
Swagata, I think this is the best question of the day. So thank you very much for asking this. And I, first of all, to conserve this ecosystem, we need to stop troubling the people over there and allow them to increase the fish pond area. I will give you an interesting statistic, and that is this. The amount of shrinkage that has happened between the year 2000 and say last year, 20 years, is, let me euphemistically say that it is quite huge. But in spite of this, there are people who have seen and found that remember that paddy growing area that I showed, paddy cum fishery, that area, there are more and more people who find that, growing paddy will not give them as much of returns as growing fish, and so they are utilizing utilizing sewage more for growing fish than for growing paddy. So this dynamic keeps on changing within the wetlands. But what you need is uh, improvement in the city's sewage system, because the city's sewage system needs much of rejuvenation, and that's what comes back to our ecosystem restoration theme. So it needs much of rejuvenation so that more and more sewage can be made available. When more and more sewage is made available, and when the bheris are, the fish ponds are improved also along with the wastewater canals, then you will have, you don't have to do anything separately. The wetlands will really thrive at a prolific pace, and in a way that we all will love to see. So we basically need that rejuvenation. And people from Kolkata or anywhere else need to understand that these are wetlands and not wastelands. And therefore, this continuous attraction of going and see how they can build a house there cheaply, this has to absolutely stop. Because if the wetlands don't survive, we don't survive. And it's a continuous thing. As civil society, those of us who know what the wetlands are and what they are all about, we keep on spreading the word that this has to go on. I mean, people from all over the world come and see the wetlands. People from all over the world come and understand what Dhruba Jyoti Ghosh was. And people from Kolkata, very few of them really think of what Dhruba Jyoti Ghosh did for the wetlands and why these wetlands are so important. So he was this amazing person who was known to the world and who passed away very quietly, with very little celebration in the city for as long as he lived.
Ma'am, thank you. And ma'am, you just mentioned a word that is it is not a wasteland. I just want to know, ma'am. Ma'am, we all know that Dhapa is there, just beside the East Calcutta wetland. Ma'am, I think leaching is the biggest factor which is affecting wetland as well as the groundwater. Is it, ma'am?
So Dhapa, I didn't deal with Dhapa in today's presentation because Dhapa is a story by itself. These wetlands are called the East Kolkata Wetlands and Waste Recycling Region. That means it is an integrated solid waste and sewage management system. What used to happen here, and I don't have that map now, I'm apologizing for that. What used to happen here, if you look at Google Map, Google Earth, then you will see the Dhapa area, there were long finger ponds and vegetable gardens. So one finger pond and then a vegetable garden, and then another finger pond and a vegetable garden. So the waste that used to come from the city, the solid waste, that was actually dumped. And then the waste pickers, who are an integral part of our ecosystem, they used to remove the non-organic waste. At that point of time, organic waste used to be something like 92%. And they used to remove the non-organic waste that was dumped on these vegetable fields, and they used to sell it off. And the organic waste used to be dealt with, used to be utilized for vegetable growing. And basically, we have, because the Calcutta Municipal Corporation has lost sight of how this used to happen and artificially separated the paddy fields, the growing fields from the kind of work that the waste pickers do. this has become a hindrance. Today we have about 52% of organic waste, and the rest of it is inorganic waste, and one-fifth of the total is construction waste. We are looking at a different place to dump the construction waste instead of dumping it here, because that's causing a problem, and some land has been identified. But still, we need to have segregation at source, so that that segregation of source can then be utilized properly. The organic part can be utilized in the vegetable fields, and the non-organic part, that can be can be biomined, and that can be reused, recycled, in whichever way it is possible to do it, because there are various ways of recycling. And I will tell you one thing. Do you know how many people how many people come daily from the different wetland villages to the Dhapa dump site? Do you have any idea?
No, ma'am, I actually don't have any idea
Okay,
regarding that.
okay. So I
But
will tell you that. I will
Yeah,
tell you that
Swagata, I think if you
10,000.
could just let, sorry, Swagata, if you could just let Dhruba finish her response, and then we will take, keeping mindful of the time, if you
Yeah.
could just maybe have one last question, and then we'll have to close.
no, no, ma'am, I actually had these two questions because actually worked. I mean, worked on a presentation in this East Calcutta wetland, and these two was my main question. And I think I have some answer from ma'am's answer. Thank you so much. Thank you for answering me.
Thank you, Swagata. Sorry, I'm just being mindful of the time. Is there any other last question before we kind of conclude and close this session?
Hi, ma'am. I'm Shomodip Rai, Vidyasagar University, MSc Environment Science. Ma'am, want to dissertation on this topic, the wetland. Can you please help me, ma'am?
Dhruba, could you please put in your email ID in the chat box? So if people want to reach out to you, they can reach out to you, if that's okay with you. While that's happening, are there any other closing questions in relation to some of the others who are who are here and maybe far away from Kolkata, but also still have experience in living in that region?
Yeah, I think Nikita Shetty is
Thank you
raised her
very
hand.
much, ma'am.
Sure, sure.
Yeah, Nikita, you can go ahead and ask your question.
Yeah, I don't think Nikita is audible. Okay, maybe we can reach out to her again later on. I think in terms of kind of concluding the session, because we are looking at, we're way over time. I think the interesting part about this presentation and what it brings to fore is the kind of interlinkages that we see, right, in terms of managing city waste, water waste itself, which you were just talking about earlier in terms of segregation at source and how that's reaching different levels. And also the fact that, without community participation in making that happen, whether it is at source segregation or, being educated about what needs to happen in an urban ecosystem, I think we would not be able to do any innovative measures, right? And we would not be able to make people understand the importance of living with nature. And I think that's really what I would like to kind of conclude with. But I think this was an absolutely exciting and interesting presentation, because it's gotten me thinking about a lot of things that happen in Bangalore. And those who are living here will also relate to that, because you see, because of mismanagement of wastewater or waste management systems, we have so many issues. We have so many problems that we are facing in terms of quality of life, in terms of daily things that we have to look at, in terms of Belandur Lake being on fire, and that's become global news, right? I mean, these are the kind of things that whether it's the Ganga Action Plan, whether it's the East Kolkata wetlands, or whether it is the Vishwa Bharati or Belandur, I mean, we are all facing similar but slightly differentiated kind of issues. And the urbanization that we are seeing today is completely unplanned and mismanaged, and therefore there is a need for not just citizen action but also of working with stakeholders within the government to kind of impress upon them through research, through scientific understanding of these ecosystems and what they can bring to us, right, in terms of improving our livelihoods and our city livelihoods and city quality. So I think with that, if Dhruba, if you have any final kind of words that you want to end with, we'd like to close the session.
My my final words would be, for a city to survive, there has to be a village nearby. Otherwise, cities will never survive. And this is something that we must remember. The urban and the peri-urban need to go together. This is the most important, most fundamental lesson of the East Calcutta wetlands. Because we are a cluster of the wetlands are a cluster of 32 villages and parts of 2 municipal corporation areas. And if village and city do not survive together, then we don't survive at all. There's been some fundamental work done about, ecological footprints. And this work started in 1996 and went on. And the scientists who worked with that, they have shown that every city consumes, say Vancouver consumed 200 times of what its total number of citizens was supposed to consume. 200 times. So, if we are not going to coexist with villages, who will supply that production? If we are not going to coexist with villages, our fundamental understanding of sustainable development, it will come to a complete naught. And so when we start our decade of ecosystem restoration from this year onwards, this is something that we need to remember. A city with a village together, a city by the side of a wetland is what we are, what Calcutta is. So that is my message to all of you. And I will also pay my respects to Sir, who taught me this all through his life, because I worked with him for 2 decades. We need environmental stewards and we need city and village to coexist together. Thank you so much, Manuel.
Great, thank you, Dhruva. That was amazing. I think putting that together in perspective. Thank you, everybody, for joining, and Dhruva, especially for you for a wonderful presentation, for agreeing to be online, and give us this World Environment Day special, presentation on such a relevant topic for all of us. So thank you once again, and have a safe and good weekend. World Environment Day to all of you. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Goodbye.